Welcome back to Swordman Josh Gaming, and for those of you that follow the channel, you guys knew that myself had a challenge with Absolute Cactus to build a $50 commander deck, and that price was based off of MTG Mid. And new camera setup. I have two cameras now. I can do this here. So he ended up building a black Voltron style deck, and as I promised I'd do a deck tech on this, I built Tetsuko, sorry about the glare on that, Tetsuko Umezawa Fugitive. This is a blue monocolored commander, one blue, one colorless. Creatures you control with power or toughness 1 or less can't be blocked, and it's a 1/3 by itself. So, a great body to work with. The deck that I'm going to show you is missing a couple of cards. I traded out an equipment that was already in it. I already did a couple of small upgrades to this deck. I liked it enough. I'm going to do some other upgrades in the future to it and keep it around. Make it a little more competitive. But I've already swapped out at least 3 cards in this deck compared to the way it was when I originally built it as a 50 card deck. Like I said, one was an equipment that equivalency gave a creature, if it, I don't remember the name of the equipment, but you guys might be able to put it in the comments below. If a creature dealt damage, it does double that damage, but if it takes damage, it takes double that damage as well, which didn't really bother me with unblockable creatures, but I'm not hitting for a ton of damage. I swapped that out, and I swapped out an island, and I swapped out another card as well, and I can't remember what it was. But let's get into this deck tech. So knowing that Tetsuko makes creatures of power or toughness 1 or less unblockable, obviously you can imagine what we can do. I've kind of broke this down into the different parts of the deck, and being your card draw engines, your hate cards, your no maximum hand size cards, because you should be drawing a lot of cards, a couple other cards, other creatures that don't draw cards, and then the land base, and then the couple of upgrades that I've already put into it. So let's get this started. Sorry for the beep. So first off, we're going to go into our card draw suite. So our first card draw suite, first card in our suite is Monastery Siege. Like I said, this is all based off of TCG Mid. We use an app called MTG Unofficial, and that app you can set to make all the cards in there to TCG Mid price. So we did that, and except for the few outliers, like I'm running a Library of Lang, and that app said that Library of Lang was like $46. So we actually had to go out to TCG and find out what the actual mid price is, because I think that's probably an unlimited price or something like that. So we had some anomalies like that, and this was not including basic lands. So it was all of your cards minus basic lands had to be under $50 for your deck. So my first one is Monastery Siege. You pick cons or dragons. It's early game. At the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card, then discard a card. Sorry for all the beeping. Let me silence my phones here. Give me 1 second. Alright, now that that's taken care of. But in late game, it's card protection. So if you pick dragon, spells your opponent casts that target you or a permanent you control cost 2 more to cast. I've never played it for the dragons because I've never made it that far into an endgame, and I'll get to the finishing portion of it here in a little bit also. Our first card draw is a Jessian Thief. Of course, attack power 1. It does have prowess, but you don't really want to trigger it. It's more for that attack power 1. You could trigger the prowess if you have an open board to attack into, but whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. There are a bunch of cards that will loot and rummage also with 1 power or toughness, but I went specifically only for those that draw cards. So I didn't want the downside. Next one is our Ninja Mistblade Shinobi. Again, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may return target creature that player controls to its owner's hands. So it's card advantage also. It's not really card draw, but it is card advantage. Our next is Lu Jun Scholar General. This one has horsemanship, so it can get through most of the time anyways. So horsemanship is this creature can't be blocked except by creatures with horsemanship. Except for this card. I don't know how many cards are out there that have horsemanship. But it's the same as the others. If it deals damage to an opponent, you get to draw a card. You can see our card draw is strong. Thieving Magpie. It's a 1/3 flyer. When it deals damage to an opponent, you draw a card. Catching a Trend. Scroll Thief. 1/3 body. Whenever Scroll Thief deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Sukar Spellblade. Whenever you cast an instance or sorcery spell, put a charge counter on this card. And when it deals combat damage to a player, draw X cards, where X is the number of charge counters. So you can draw cards off of this, but it takes a little more setup. But you should be playing some instants and sorceries in terms of counter spells, because we have a decent counter suite in this. Ophidian, all the way back from the good old days. 1/3 body with a 0 mana activated cost. So you're not really trying to deal damage with this card, but if it deals no combat damage this turn, uses this ability only if it is attacking and unblocked, and only once each turn, and you get to draw a card. So the same as the others, except it takes the 1 point of damage away. We have Eternal of Harsh Truths. It has a 1/3 body, and you notice almost all of these are mana casting cost 3, except for the Thieving Magpie. This one has Afflict 2, so if it ever happens to be blocked, it'll deal 2 damage to the defending player. You should have Tetsuko out so it's not blocked, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player and isn't blocked, draw a card. Gateway Sneak, again the same thing. We are not running any gates in this deck because it's a monocolor deck. But the second part of it is, whenever Gateway Sneak deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Nurok Commando, 2/1. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. It also has Shroud, which can cause some problems because you can't target it either. It'd be better if it was hexproof, but still a great card. And then our last card draw, which isn't a creature, is Anticipate. It's an instant for blue and colorless. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So that's our card draw suite. The next we'll get into is our counters. Let's actually do our no hand limit size suite. So there is one in here that, of course, everybody's automatically thinking of. That's Thought Vessel. It is about a $10 or $11 card. I do have it in the deck now. It's actually it's right here, but it's one of those cards that didn't make the original cut just due to the price of it. So our first one is Vincer's Journal. It is 5 to get it out, but you have no maximum hand size, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 1 life for each card in your hand. Great for the mid-game when your life total may have gotten hit a little bit because you don't have much out there to be able to block anything big with. You just have to take the damage, but life is a resource. We have the good old-fashioned Library of Lang. This is the one I was talking about that actually TCG Mid on our app pulled it up as like a $46 card. It most certainly is not. But this also helps with hate from anybody who wants you to discard cards. So you skip your discard phase. If a card forces you to discard, you just put the cards back on top of your library. And if discard is random, you may look at the card before deciding where to discard it. So I'll read the whole thing. You must skip your discard phase of your turn. So you have no maximum hand size, basically. If a card forces you to discard, you may choose to discard to the top of your library rather than to the graveyard. And if a discard is random, you can look at the card and decide whether you want to put it on the top of your library or the graveyard. So with the card draw, typically you just put everything on top of your library. It helps out. We do have a 1/3 creature that can attack. It is Graceful Adept. It is a human wizard, and the wizard comes into play because there are a couple wizards in here, and we are running Wizard's Retort as one of our counter spells. So if you have a wizard in play, it reduces that cost by 1. But basically it's a 1/3 wizard that you have no maximum hand size, so it can attack. We have a big bad boy here and a dinosaur, Nizal Primal Tide, 5 blue. It can't be countered. It's a 7/7. You have no maximum hand size. Whenever opponent casts a non-creature spell, you get a draw card. And you can discard 3 cards and return and exile Nezhal and return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So it can protect itself against a board wipe, so you still have something on the board. And we'll get into something that this works with here in a second in terms of board wipes. Next is so that's our no hand size. And then, like I said, Thought Vessel is obviously a reasonable upgrade for that if you want to spend the extra money for a Thought Vessel, because it's a mana rock, and that's where we come into this suite, which is our mana rock suite. So you have no maximum hand size. It costs 2 to get out, and you can tap it for 1 mana of any color. So the rest of our mana rock suite, which we had to keep cheap, so you won't see a Soul Ring in here, even though that would be a very good card to put in here, is Mind Stone. Silver Mirror, which is taps for a blue, but it's a 1/1 body, which means Tetsuko can make it unblockable if you want to attack in with it. Manalith, Mana Geode, which is the better Manalith, and Darksteel Ingot, which is indestructible. So that covers our no hand limit and our mana rock suite. Next, we're going to get into what I would consider our equipment suite. So the first is Trepanation Blade. And whenever equipped creature attacks, defending player reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a land card. That creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each card revealed that way. That player puts the revealed card into his or her graveyard. Now, the reason I'm running this, I'm also running another card in the extra creature suite. So I have a backup ability of decking somebody, a backup win con, if my primary win con doesn't come to fruition. So that's one reason this is in here. Here's our next one. Equipped creature gets +1/+0. Whenever equipped creature attacks, put a 1/1 white core ally creature token on the battlefield tapped and attacking. So it just makes you dorks, and of course they're all going to be unblockable, so you can either use them for chump blockers or you can use them to attack in with for free. We have, this is the one that I was talking about with our dragon friend, Nezhal. We're running World Slayer. This isn't a card that I see very often in Magic, or anybody playing in a Magic deck. I suppose if you had a complete Flicker deck, this would be an interesting card to play. But it's 5 mana, and when equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, so you should be able to get through no problem, destroy all permanents other than World Slayer. So this is a complete board reset. So hopefully you can bring, if you're playing against people who have higher mana cost commanders, or they have their combos out or something, this is a great board wipe because it's all permanents, including lands. So it's literally a reset to 0. But hopefully with your card draw, even if you reset to 0, you can get set up faster than anybody else. So here's our next one, Scythe Claw. This is part of one of our win cons to deal damage. So all of our weenies have either 1 or 2, and a couple have a little higher attack power than that. However, they can pack a punch with a card like this. So equipped creature gets +1/+1. That's a downfall because it makes it so that way our creatures all don't have 1 defense or 1 attack. The +1/+1 hurts. However, if it gets through, when it deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half of their life rounded up. So they start at 40, all of a sudden 1 whack from this, they're down to 20. We have another card that's almost identical to it in the card of Quidus Spike, and even cheaper to get out. So equipped creature has Death Touch. It does not get any bonus attack power, which is a good thing. And whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses his or her life half of their life rounded up. So identical to Scythe Claw, but better in so many ways. Cheaper mana cost, cheaper equip cost, and it doesn't pump our creature by +1/+1. The Scythe Claw creates a germ token, so I guess that's the only good thing. When it comes into play, it creates a 0/0 germ and gives it +1/+1. So as long as your germ token doesn't die, you can get this through unblockable. If you have to equip this onto one of your other creatures, you could be in trouble. And then our last equipment that we're running is to help with dealing damage if we can't get those cards out. So it's another great equipment card. It's Moon Silver Spear. And it is 4 mana to cast it, 4 mana to equip it. Equipped creature has first strike, which really doesn't matter too much for us. However, when equipped creature attacks, you get to put a 4/4 white angel creature token onto the battlefield. Now, it's not like the core allies where it's tapped and attacking, and these angels don't have vigilance. So remember that, because a lot of angels do. But it does quickly create yourself a little army of 4/4 angel tokens. So that's our equipment suite. Now we're going to get into our other creature suite. So I'll explain why some of these are in here. The first one is Kefnet the Mindful. This is a 5/5 for a blue and 2 colorless with flying and indestructible. This could also go into our card draw suite, but we're drawing so many cards. It has a downside if you don't have 7 or more cards in your hand. And it can't attack or block unless you have 7 or more cards in your hand. But it's a 5/5 flying indestructible for 3. Almost all the time, we are going to have 7+ cards in our hand. So it's not a problem. And for a blue and 3 colorless, so later in the game, you can use it as a mana sink. You can draw a card, then you may return a land you control to its owner's hand. So, yeah, this is a great card for later in the game. Especially if you can get another combo set up where you can actually start locking if you get down to a 1v1 game to lock somebody out of the game. Our next one that I was talking about is an alternate win con. Is this 1/1 Wizard Mutant. Again, another wizard. But it's colorless blue, and when it deals combat damage to a player, that player removes the top 10 cards from their library from the game. So I don't know. Normally you'd think of exile as removing from the game, but this actually says remove from the game. I'd have to look up the extra rule sets for this and find out whether that means exile or not. I would hope that if it didn't mean exile, this makes this card even more powerful, but I'm sure it just means exile. But with Trepanation Blade and this guy, you can start exiling a lot of cards from people's libraries. To go along with that, to get rid of cards from people's libraries, we're running Mist Intruder. This one is devoid, which helps a lot because it means it has no color. So those people who hate on blue and run protection from blue or something like that, we can block things with Mist Intruder. And it is a 1/2, so it's unblockable, and it has Ingest, which is not a keyword that you see very often. But whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, the player exiles the top card of their library. So now you can see that if we have out the Raven Guildmaster, the Mist Intruder, we're exiling at least 11 cards per turn. And with the Trepanation Blade on top of it, we can exile a lot of cards per turn. And if you're playing one of those people that are running lands from their graveyard, like a Gitrog or something like that, that Trepanation Blade can actually take him out of the game super fast. Our next creature that we're running is a Chasm Skulker. And this goes into our card draw strategy so we can make a big beater. But whenever you draw a card, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Chasm Stalker. And when it dies, you create X 1/1 blue squid tokens, where X is with Island Walk, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on it. So he gets big and beefy for a while, turns into a beater to attack into your opponents. And then after he dies, you get a whole bunch of 1/1 unblockable attackers anyway. So it's a win-win. And he's a 1/1 to begin with. Our next is our biggest attacker in the deck. It's a Oval Chase dragster. It's actually an artifact and it's a vehicle, but its crew is only 1. So it makes this really easy to crew. Normally having a 1 defense would be a detriment in something like this, but it is a 6/1 with trample and haste with crew 1. So you can crew this with anything, including your commander, and it has trample and haste, and it gets in for 6 damage every single turn. So if you can get out the Quidditch Spike, half their life, and then attack in with this, you almost have somebody dead by turn 4. Turn 3 with Mana Rocks, possibly. This guy has done work for me. He doesn't look very menacing, but he's a Frostwalker, a blue and a colorless. He's a 4/1, so I've dropped him multiple games on turn 2, dropped my commander on turn 3, and then all of a sudden you have a 4/1 that's unblockable. His downside: if he becomes the target of a spell or ability, sacrifice it. Now, in terms of it being a downside, it is, but in a lot of cases, it's just forcing our opponents to use something on this to get it off the board, because otherwise it can just do a lot of damage to them. So it's generally a 1-for-1 trade, but a lot of times before they can trade out for it, he'll do 4, 8, or 12 damage to somebody. And this goes into our card draw strategy as well, because we can draw a lot of cards. And I was very happy to see that this is a cheap card. It's Psychosis Crawler. So it's 5 mana to cast, so it comes out mid-game, and its attack and power is star, where its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your hand. I've had this guy all the way up to about a 15/15 before. However, what's great about it is whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. So you can see how we have their life, and then we draw cards off of our draw suite, and then Psychosis Crawler will just flat out kill them. Our next card is Syphilid Constable. So we have a bounce suite in here as well to bounce cards. And this is part of that. Whenever Syphilid Constable deals combat damage to a player, return up to X target permanents that player controls to their owner's hand, where X is the damage dealt to that player. So all of our equipment that add offense allows us to bounce more things to their hands, and if you get this equipped with the Trepanation Blade, it can bounce a whole lot of stuff if you get lucky on the flip. And our last card, which we're only card I'm running for Graveyard Hate basically, except for the exile off the top of their library. This is as if they already have it in their graveyard. It's a 3/1 Graven Abomination. And whenever it attacks, exile a target card from defending player's graveyard. So you can actually target their combo pieces in their graveyard and get them out. So that's the rest of our almost all of our extra creatures. There are a couple in the counterspell suite that I've put in there. But that's almost all of the creatures in the deck. But we're going to come up with this little gem in our counterspell suite. And the first one that's in here, it is a creature. And it can change everything about the game. That is a cheapo Perplexing Chimera. Now this card can be very confusing, but it's 1 blue and 4 colorless for a 3/3. And this can lock people out of the game, especially if you play this and they don't have their commander out and you steal their commander and they have a commander-centric deck. But whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may exchange control of Perplexing Chimera and that spell. If you do, you may choose new targets for the spell. Well, I guess it doesn't really... maybe I misunderstood this, but it says spell, so you could steal somebody's Cyclonic Rift or something like that. We may have read it. I may have to read the rules on this. So I may have misplayed it in one game where I stole somebody's commander with it. But still, a great card. Stops a lot of spells, stops a lot of combo pieces just because you can steal that from them. Our next hate card, this is hate / counter spells, is River's Rebuke. Now, we can't run Cyclonic Rift due to that $50 budget, but we can run River's Rebuke, which for 4 blue, return all non-land permanents target player controls to their hand. So it's a hate on one player. Cyclonic Rift, of course, is better because it's a hate on all players, but still a great card. This one's a counter spell / protect us. It's Siren Storm Tamer. It's a 1/1 flyer for 1, so it can be equipped with our equipment and attack in unblockable. However, for a blue, you can sacrifice Siren Storm Tamer and counter target speller ability that targets you or a creature you control. So it can just flat out, you can sack a 1/1 and protect one of our other creatures that's more valuable than the Siren Storm Tamer, and it is some of our few flyers in here to block those evasion builds. Our next hate card is Deep Freeze for a blue and 2 colorless. It's an enchant creature, and this one works well on commanders as well. Enchanted creature has base power and toughness 0/4. It has defender, and here's the key words: it loses all other abilities. It is a blue wall in addition to its other colors and types. So it losing all other abilities hates on a lot of commanders, and one of the reasons it's in here. Then they have to have enchantment removal. Here's part of our tap untap suite. So this actually goes with one of the reasonable upgrades that I put in the deck, because if you can get this in combination with Stasis, then I know this is a dick card, but I ran it anyways because most of the time you're not going to get this combination. But this has Cypher on it, so it's a blue and a colorless, and you may tap or untap target permanent, then you may tap or untap another target permanent. So you can untap or tap 2 target permanents when this is on something. It has Cypher, so that means after you cast this spell, you encode it onto a creature you control. And whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, you can cast a copy of this spell without paying its mana cost. So for those who are astute, you'll see this combo. You need 1 island, Stasis in play, Hidden Strings ciphered onto a creature. You attack with that creature, you deal, so you've paid your 1 blue. Let's say you're completely tapped out, you paid your 1 blue during your upkeep to keep your Stasis. You attack with that creature. You let the cipher hit. You untap that creature and you untap an island. That then gives you an island the next turn to pay for Stasis again. So then you've locked somebody completely out of the game in terms of everything they have tapped down stays tapped down. And you can continue to attack into them one at a time, and you can build your mana base up to cast other things playing 1 land at a time. Now, the card that works with that to lock them completely out. So this is a 3-card combo. Let me find it real quick. It's probably over here in the last suite of cards. Here it is. So here's your 3-card combo to lock a game completely out into a $50 TCG mid deck. So the last card is Frozen Aether. Artifacts, creatures, and lands your opponent control come into play tapped. So this is a great little 3-card combo. You just need a one of your little 1 attacking cast cost creatures, and then you can keep playing lanes to play other things in your deck while everybody else is locked out of the game. When you get this combo down and you have Hidden Strings ciphered on a creature, most people just scoop. They can't get around this. So we saw Frozen Aether, we saw Hidden Strings. Our next removal card is Rapid Hybridization. For a blue, you get to destroy a target creature. It cannot be regenerated, and they get a 3/3 Green Frog Lizard token. Great removal card. Cheap cost at instant speed. Allows you to stop a lot of combos if you're tapped down and can't actually cast a counterspell. Our next bounce card is Sigil of Sleep. It's an enchant creature. Whenever enchanted creature deals damage to a player, return target creature that player controls to its owner's hand. So if you have out that other combo, you can then return all their creatures to their hand, which is even better. But if you don't, you can bounce a creature every single turn with just attacking without even caring because all of your creatures are unblocked. The next card that we're playing is not really removal, but it is a hesitation card, and that's Vapor Snag, but it's 1 blue at instant speed. So to stop combo decks, this is actually really helpful because a lot of combo decks rely off of a particular creature. So you return target creature to its owner's hand, and its controller loses 1 life. It's a bounce. It's a bounce for 1. It's a bounce for 1 at instant speed. There's nothing more to say. It's a great card. Our next Cypher card, Hands of Binding. So this is a great card if somebody's playing a Voltron deck like Absolute Cactus built, because this will lock him out of the game. Tap target creature an opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. However, it has Cypher on it. So that means you can do this every single turn with your creatures that are attacking. You lock a Voltron commander out of the game unless they have Hexproof or Shroud on their commander. And if they manage to play a Lightning Greaves to try to give themselves Hexproof, this is a card that little pretty Jim here, that I have never seen played in any of my commander games, but I like it. It's an instant for 1 blue and 2 colorless. Gain control of target equipment. You would think that this would be very focused and centric, but I haven't played a commander game where somebody hasn't been playing some kind of equipment. Don't care what the equipment is, Helm of the Host, if it's Lightning Greaves, if it's Trailblazers Boots, everybody typically has 1, 2, 3 pieces of equipment. You put that into a pod, and then you're talking about 3 to 12 pieces of equipment in a commander game. More than likely you'll get to play this card. But what it does is, and what I like about it, is you gain control of target equipment, then create a 0/0 black germ creature token and attach that equipment to it. Now what's great about this is after you attach the equipment to it, let's say it is a Lightning Greaves. Lightning Greaves doesn't give any attack or defensive power, so your germ token immediately dies. But you have gained control of the equipment. So that means if your germ token dies, it stays on your side of the battlefield. It's now underneath your control for the rest of the game. Unless they have some way of destroying it, putting it in their graveyard, and then recurring it, or they have something like this themselves. So you permanently gain 1 piece of equipment for the rest of the game. So I'm not running Lightning Greaves in here, and I'm not running a bunch of the other good equipment because it was outside my budget price. However, this little guy can steal it from anybody, which is great. Our next removal card, so I count that as a removal card. It removes equipment from the game. It's great. But our next removal card is Imprisoned in the Moon. And this is another great one to take care of commander-centric decks. So blue and 2 colorless. The last one creates a 0/4 wall. So if somebody attacks into it and they block with that wall, their commander can go to the command zone and then they can recast it. With this one, it's a little harder for them to do that. So it's an enchant creature, land, or planeswalker. So it can also get rid of a Gaia's Cradle or something like that. But enchanted permanent becomes a colorless land. So it's a little harder for people to remove. That taps for a colorless mana. It loses all other card types and abilities. So if it's a creature, it's no longer a creature. If it's got a tribal that it's synergizing with, it's no longer that tribal. So bye-bye Sliver Queen. Bye-bye, Gishath. Bye-bye any tribal card that's out there because it loses all of its card types and abilities. And since it turns into a land, it's very hard for them to get it back. Next removal, Reality Shift. Exile target creature. Its controller manifests the top card of their library. 1 blue, 1 colorless at instant speed. Great removal card. They do get a 2/2 creature that they could possibly cast later for the cost, but a lot of times if they don't get a creature, then they can't manifest that card. This, I actually played this on somebody. They tried to get their combo piece, and they, I think it was a Mystical Tutor. It was one of the tutors that puts it on top of their library, and they had a creature in play. I cast this at instant speed, exiled their creature, and then manifested that card, which I knew was not a creature, and they needed it for their combo, and then they couldn't do anything with it. So it was a great little piece there. And then counter spells. So Dissipate. This one's great because it actually exiles the card if it's countered. So it's a blue colorless. We have Good Old Fashioned Counterspell for blue. We have Foil in case you're tapped out. Blue and 2. However, you can discard an island card and another card rather than paying the spell's mana cost and counter target spells. So it's the poor man's Force of Will. Great little card. We have Wizard's Retort. That's the reason I pointed out a couple of the wizards. I think there's about 4 of them in the deck or so. But it's blue colorless, and it counters target spell. But if you have a wizard in play, it's just a counter spell cost. Cancel, excuse me. Blue colorless, counter target spell. And in case somebody's playing protection from blue or something, I am running a copy of Void Shatter. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's blue colorless, but it's devoid. So if you're playing a red deck and they happen to have a red elemental blast in their deck, they can't counter or do anything with that red elemental blast against Void Shatter because it's devoid. And it also has counter target spell, and if the spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into their owner's graveyard. So it's another exile card. So that's our counterspell suite, and we're almost done. I know this video has gone a while. So here's the rest of the cards minus the mana base and a couple reasonable upgrades. The first one is Meek Stone. So all of our creatures are typically 1s or 2s, so we don't care about this, but any creature with power greater than 2 may not be untapped as normal during the untap phase, so this shuts down any Go Tall deck or Voltron type deck that's trying to deal a lot of damage. It'll also shut down a Blightsteel Colossus. It will shut down a lot of decks because they all run creatures with big power or toughness. And we can just continue to untap and attack in, draw cards, draw the answers, and keep playing. The next one is, in case we are light or we fully attack, is Mirror March. This is a fun little card. For blue and 4, you cast it, and only during the declare blocker step. So they declare their attackers, they attack in with everything. This is a great combat trick. For each creature attacking you or a planeswalker you control, you get to put a copy of that creature onto the battlefield that's blocking that creature and exile those tokens at end of combat. Typically with this, if somebody's attacking in with their entire board on you because they see that you're open and they want you out of the game, you play this card and there's no counterspell on board, then this typically wipes out their entire army and then they are completely open to everybody else. I love this card. Mana cost is a little high. There's another card that I wish I'd remembered to put in here, but I don't remember whether it was in budget or not. It basically is an instant speed, and everything that's attacking you untaps, and then it has to attack again, but it can't attack you. So it can break up some alliances and stuff like that in the pod. But this is a great card anyways, and I had it just sitting in my stash. Our next is to create little... It's Thopter Spy Network, and it's just create some more little dorks. So we have 3 dork creators. We have the 4/4 Angels, the 1/1 core ally tokens, and this creates 1/1 colorless Thopter tokens with flying. So at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control an artifact, and there are quite a few in the deck, you get to put a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying onto the battlefield. And whenever one or more artifact creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So it's card advantage, and you get a bunch of little dorks to go with it. Our next card is Mystical Tutor, so that way you can go find the counter spells if you need them, or the rapid hybridization to take out a big threat that's already on the board. One of only 2 ways to get artifacts out of the graveyard, because we're running only 2 that halves people's lives. It's Run Aground. So a blue and 3 colorless at instant speed, so you can cast it at the end step of the person right before you, so you can draw your artifact. Put target artifact or creature on top of its owner's library. Great card. One of only 2 ways to get back artifacts. And then the last card, which is the cheapest version of extra turns, is Time Stretch. And when I put this card in here, I thought I was never going to play it at a 10 mana casting cost. But with the number of mana rocks that's in here and the amount of card draw, you basically never miss a land drop. And this one is 8 blue blue, and target player takes 2 extra turns after this one. So after that's played, if you have your equipment out, your Psychosis Crawler, and a bunch of other stuff, typically you just win the game. So we're going to get into mana base now. There are only 3 non-basic lanes in this deck. The first one is Buried Ruins. Like I said, there are only 2 ways to get artifacts back. Buried Ruins is the other. So you can tap it to add a colorless, or 2 mana and tap it, sacrifice it, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Our second way to get back artifacts. Next is a Cycling Land, Lonely Sandbar. It comes into play, tap it for a blue, cycle it for a blue. You can get rid of it in mid and late game and just have more card advantage. And the last one is another no maximum hand size, which I could have put it in that other section, but it's a land. It's Reliquary Tower. No maximum hand size, and tap it to add a colorless. And then there are 35 islands. So like I said, I've already added a couple of cards in here that weren't part of the original set. One was an equipment, one was an island for the Thought Vessel, and I can't remember the other one. But we've already talked about one of the cards that we added, which was Thought Vessel. We've already talked about Stasis to lock people out of the game. And then the last reasonable upgrade when you start playing with pods that didn't put their own price restriction on their decks and they're running multicolors is, of course, Back to Basics. This card's still cheap right now, about $6, $7. I expect it to go up in price. But basically, non-basic lands don't untap during their controller's untap phase. So anybody who's running a bunch of non-basics, it screws them out of the game. So there are a couple of different cards that can really throw people under the bus. And this is one of them. Stasis is another. And that's the deck, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, minus the Thought Vessel, the Back to Basics, and the Stasis for the other 3 cards I had in there, this whole deck, minus the basic lands, was under $50 TCG Mid, based off of the app MTG Unofficial, which is what we use to build our decks a lot. And I don't know if Absolute Cactus is going to come on the channel and do his original deck tech or not. He did a Voltron build and actually used an uncommon legendary creature from Dominaria. It's the black one. It's wow, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head right now. But he won, I believe, 1 game. I won the rest of them. The game that he won, I think we played about 6 games or so. The game that he won, I couldn't curve out quick enough, and I had no answers for anything he was doing. And he played his commander. It's a 5 mana drop commander. He played it on turn 3. I believe it has 9 attack power, and he killed me with commander damage really quick. Even though I managed to rapid hybridization his commander, he then had Bubbling Muck, which doubled its High Tide for black, which then doubled all of his swamps. So I believe he replayed his commander on turn 5, and I just didn't have an answer for it. I had no way of dealing with something, and he had unblockable on it. So I just had no way of dealing with it after that point. So if you liked what you saw on this deck tech, leave a comment down below. If you want to see other budget decks, leave a comment down below. I have some ideas for a couple other budget decks that might be fun. I typically try to build my decks under $100 for my all-in price, and then I'll add upgrades from my personal collection into it, but I never spend more than $100 buying cards from like Card Kingdom to put into a deck. But then I will supplement in for cards that are already in my collection. So a lot of my commander decks do end up being finally over $100, but all of them are well under $200. I know a lot of people have $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 commander decks, and it's always fun to walk in and beat somebody with a $50 or $70 commander deck. That's something that I've kind of started to become known about in my group, is to bring in cheap commander decks that are pretty competitive just because of the synergies that they build. My Teshar deck is one of those. But if you want to see that Teshar deck tech, let me know. Leave a comment down below, and I can do that deck tech as well. But this has gone on for 45 minutes for this deck tech, which seems a little long, but I wanted to go through everything. This is all 100 cards. Leave a comment down below. Subscribe if you want to see more. Definitely leave a comment if you want to see more commander deck techs or pauper deck techs of pauper decks that I've built. Those are pretty much the two styles that I play. I hope everybody has a great New Horizons pre-release weekend. I'm looking forward to it. I'm playing at my local LGS, which is Common Room Games. If you're in the area and want to come play with me at Common Room, I believe that they do not have any seating capacity limits for New Horizons. So come down and play. Let me know you saw me on the channel. And as always, I hope Keep Calm Kitty stays with you. Everybody have a great weekend and enjoy the rest of your week. Good night, everybody.